which is the fourth gate, the gate of trust. So in here, when he talks about the idea of trust, he also starts talking about this idea that we also have to do hishtadlus, which means that we have to also do and participate in this world in order for there to be blessings. You can't just say, I trust, and I trust in Hashem, and it doesn't really matter what I do. But the way he describes this, and the blessing will come no matter what, but we have to actually make a vessel for it. This is the way he describes it. And the way he very nicely describes it is that how do you know, not only do you have to work, and if a person have a certain vocation, and do something in this world in order to make a living, in order to participate in this world, but he also gives an analogy in a great length, something very beautiful, and he says that how does a person know which job they should perform in this world? And you would assume that it wouldn't matter, because if everything is coming from the blessing of Hashem, everything is a blessing from God, so what does it really matter what the job is and what the task that you do? If you can be a creative and be an artist, so why do that and try to earn a living when you could also, lawn the lawn, mow the lawn? Maybe that's something that you should do. Like, how do you know what is a thing to do? And he gives an analogy. He says, just like in the animal kingdom, the animals that are, it's kind of like reverse, but this is the way he describes it, is that just like you see in the animal kingdom, that they have all every animal is created with the perfect ability to do what it has to be doing in this world. So for example, if there's an animal that's a hunter, that they're a predator, so therefore they have very strong teeth and strong claws, because that's what they're supposed to be doing, versus an animal that does not eat meat and just grazes the land, is more gentle. And therefore, he says that if you look at in the animal kingdom, everything is created in a way, the physical body of the animal is created in a way that's supportive and conducive for the animal to be fully who they are. Every animal being in the animal kingdom doing exactly what they can be doing. And the same thing also he says, you have to think about this in the human kingdom with man, that every person's built and it has a certain genetic makeup and is built in a certain way. Some people are more intellectually inclined. And he says, obviously, the people that are more intellectual should be pursuing more intellectual pursuits. People that are more creative should be pursuing creative pursuits. People that have physical strength should be pursuing things that are relevant to physical strength. So a person really has to, before they choose the job or the type of living that they want to earn, through which medium, they have to really self-evaluate and say, like, what is actually, on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a mental level, on a spiritual level, what is the most consistent thing that I can be doing in this world that would be consistent with who I am on my physical, spiritual, mental, emotional level, and then pursue that. So a person has to do hishtadlus, which means a person has to figure out what they are good in this world based on their capacity, their intellectual capacity, emotional capacity, physical capacity, even spiritual capacity. What are they best suited to be doing in this world? And they have to pursue it. They have to tailor their life in terms of their livelihood based on the quality of who they are. But then the overarching question is, why? If in fact the blessing, the source of blessing comes from the Karachim, comes from the source of all blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem, that you are the source of all blessing, so what is it relevant what you do, and why should you even do it to begin with? Why does a person have to make a vessel? So one way of understanding is, and how does these two things, contradictory things, seemingly contradictory things, come together? So one way to understand it is that the participation, the work that we do in this world, is we're mamin v'zereah, which means we trust in the blessings of Hashem, and then we create a certain vessel, a certain form through which that blessing through which the blessing can be drawn into. So we do, and we trust. And how do we know when we're overdoing and where we're trusting too much, and when we're not having enough trust and when we're overdoing? That is like a very delicate balance between these two, and we have to understand that we are interested in doing, and the result that's already dependent on Hashem. So a person says, I need to earn a living. Let's say we're talking about livelihood, earning a living. A person says, I need to work to make a living, and I'm going to try to sell shoes or try to be involved in real estate, whatever that job that I have, an opportunity to have. Again, one that's consistent with my personality. If I'm a salesman and I'm good with people, then maybe being a salesman. If I'm good with numbers, maybe being an accountant. Whatever is good in my own life, trying to be that. And then you say, I'm doing the effort, and that's involved in my participation, but the result, that's already up to Hashem. I do my work, and then I say, what happens from my work, this is like similar what the Baal Shem Tov teaches is, when you pray, when you daven, when you pray to create something and to draw down this blessing, and then when you finish praying, you say, okay, now I did my part, and now the result of my effort will be coming down from above. So that's one way to see it, is that the balance between these two things, between participation and trust, is just a matter of participation is the vessel through which the trust, through which the blessing is received. And how much do we participate? As much as effort we put in. But then in terms of the result of what happens, that already we have trust. Obviously, this is not a very clean-cut definition because there's various levels of how much you participate. And we have to do things in its normative way of doing. What would be the normal way of how a person would do something, not to do with a lot of anxiety, obviously, and not to overdo it, and say, this is what I want to do in order to participate. And then to say, okay, but now I already trust now that the blessings will come. That's one way of understanding the connection or the harmony between these two dynamics. One is the idea of bitachon, which is trust, and one is the idea of ishtadlus, which is participation and involvement in order to receive the blessing. There's another creative way of thinking about this, which is sort of the base of Levi talks about it, and there's other tzaddikim speak about this idea, which is a very creative way of speaking about it, is that instead of seeing them as part of one dynamic and trying to figure out where trust begins, or I'm sorry, where we're involved and where work begins and where it tails off into trust, and where does it end? Where does work begin and end, and where does trust begin? And they're seeing them as part of one thing, or even saying that you have to be trustful while you're working. That means while you're doing it, to live without anxiety or without apprehension, and just to say, okay, I'm doing my part, I'm participating, and then the blessing will come. Another way of thinking about this is that they're actually almost two separate categories, and we have to learn how to compartmentalize them. And this is a general truth with a lot of different spiritual practices or mental inner practices, is compartmentalization is very important to understand that there is a mitzvah, there's a special command for bitachon, which is one way of doing things, which is that I trust. And simultaneously, there's a totally separate command in the Torah which says, that with the sweat of your brow you'll eat bread, which means there's a separate idea, that a parallel idea of doing, of working. So instead of seeing them as linked and trying to figure out where one ends and one begins, seeing them as two separate things. I need to be doing trust fully, and to hold that in my mind, in my perception, in my consciousness, in my heart, to hold that idea that I trust fully that I will receive the blessings, and Hashem is a tevel lahita. The nature of good is to give good, and Hashem will give me the blessings that I need to receive in my life. And simultaneously, to compartmentalize, to have another part of the brain to say, and yet from another perspective, I need to do as much as I can and do in this world and work, because that's also the will of Hashem. That's the will of the Creator. These are two ways how to think about it in terms of the balance between these two ideas, between bitachon and ishtadlus, between trust and participation. There's another level over here, which is even deeper and more subtle, but something that's an important point that has to be brought out. One of the famous Chazals, one of the famous teachings of Chazal about trust, the teachings of the sage about trust, which is found in the Medrash, also found in the Zohar HaKadosh, is when Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph, is now in jail because of a story with the wife of Potiphar, and he's in Egypt. He's in the depth of the abyss. Not only is in Egypt sold into slavery, but now in slavery he's been accused of adultery and he's been thrown into a pit, into the prison, into a dungeon. And he's sitting there with these two ministers that were also stuck in prison. One was the Sha'ar HaBitachon, one was the minister of drink, and one was the minister of food. And they have dreams. And Yosef interprets their dreams. And he tells the Sha'ar HaBitachon, the minister of drink, basically the chief butler, that eventually you'll leave prison. And when you leave, please remember me for good and like put a good word into the Pharaoh that he should release me. But the Torah says, that the Sha'ar HaBitachon did not remember Yosef, and he forgot him. He entered into the world of forgetfulness. That's what the Zohar says, which means an eclipse of the entire idea that there is even a Yosef in the prison. Why? So the Zohar says that because Yosef lacked trust, and not only did he lack trust, he asked for a favor to be released from the Sha'ar HaBitachon, from this minister, of this butler, to give him a good word to be released. And not only did he show a lack of trust, but he was actually punished for it, and he had to remain a longer time in prison, in the cell because of this. And this is very puzzling. Because we just said before that part of trust, either compartmentalizing it or simultaneously, that part of trust is also ishtadlus, that the person has to participate. So what did Yosef do? Yosef did the correct thing. What did Yosef do? He was stuck in prison. He saw a way out. He saw that he helped this butler. So he said, do me a favor, when you come out, remember me, which is seemingly the most normal thing to do. And that means he has trust, because he can say that Hashem put this prisoner, this other minister, next to me in prison, and I can interpret his dreams. Therefore, Hashem is telling me that I should ask him a favor so I can get out of prison. I'm utilizing the tools that Hashem gave me in the prison. So what was the problem with Yosef? So it's explained in the Sichos. The Rebbe explains that there's, in short, Yosef represents a different type of person. Yosef is a person, to say it a little differently, Yosef represents a person that's in a dream state. Yosef, he's the dreamer. That means Yosef as a child, as a young adult, has a dream of becoming a king, a very powerful man. And he's just, he's a shepherd boy, really. It's living in Canaan, and he has this tremendous dream of being like one of the most powerful people in the world, a big king. And he repeats the dream over to his brothers. His father is upset, but his father, Shamar Sadavar, his father holds it, protects this dream, believes in this dream. And Yosef's life is essentially an unfolding of this dream state. And in this dream state, that's the unfolding of Yosef's life, Yosef never participates. Yosef is always passive. For example, and the big story is where he's thrown into the pit by his brothers, or he's sold to slavery by the Minyanim or by his brothers. He's sold into slavery. You never see in the Torah itself, granted that there are midrashim, but in the Torah itself, it doesn't say anywhere that Yosef himself, protested and cried out and says, "No, don't throw me in the pit, or don't sell me to slavery. You're my brother. You're my brothers. How could you do this to me?" Why didn't Yosef do that? Because Yosef realized, and there's a bigger question, which Ramban asked, and many ask, is how come when Yosef finally does become the vizier and does become the second in command in Egypt, so his dream seems to be, almost fulfilled, besides the fact that his brothers didn't yet come down to bow down to him, all his brothers didn't yet come down. Why doesn't he go send the messenger, or immediately, even before his brothers show up, why doesn't he send the messenger to his father that he's alive? He's his father's most beloved child. Why doesn't he send the messenger to his father to say, by the way, Dad, everything's fine. I'm actually one of the most powerful people in the world. I'm in Egypt. And I'm living, a just life and a holy life and a righteous life, and come visit me. Why doesn't he tell him his father's in such pain of the death of his child? Why doesn't he do that? Because Yosef recognizes that in his life, things unfold for him. There's something mysterious or magical that's unfolding in his life. And the less he participates in this unfolding, the better. The moment he participates, he wakes up from the dream. He's no longer in that dream state. In a dream, you're an observer. You're observing something that's occurring to you, and you're not a participator, or else it's a lucid dream. But and the definition of a dream is that you're seeing a vision of yourself doing all different types of things and going into different wonderful places, or the opposite of that. But the definition of the dream is that Yosef understands that his life, and he's a Balach Alomis, he's the master of the dream. He's the master of the dream. He understands that the least he participates, the better actually the outcome, which means that his life is unfolding in a very magical way. And you think that you do something negative to Yosef, but it always actually turns out to be the most wonderful thing. That he's sold into slavery, but then he ends up in Potiphar's house. He ends up in Potiphar's house, and then eventually he ends up in the pit. He ends up in the pit, and then he speaks to the Saramashkin. He ends up speaking to the Saramashkin, to these butler, and then because of that, eventually he does interpret the dreams of Pharaoh, and then he becomes the most important person. So Yosef realizes at a young age that the less he does, and this is part of his personality, part of the attribute of the midah of Yosef, is that the less he participates, the more he allows his life to unfold. So therefore, Yosef never sends messengers to his father, doesn't complain about the sale that he sold into slavery, because he understands that there's something at work here that's much larger than him. And he just has to observe and go with it and allow for the unfolding of this dream to happen. This is Yosef's personality. That's what Yosef called the Yosef HaTzadik, the highest level of Tzadik. Yosef has such a type of a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, such a deep relationship with Hashem, that his life just unfolds. And this is the secret why Yosef is punished for asking for the Saramashkin, for asking for the butler for help. Because Yosef is punished because for him, that was a default. That was a negativity. That was something that was negative. That was a fault. Because for him, that means that he's trying to participate in his life unfolding, where really he just had to let things flow and unfold without actually his participation at all. And the fact that he participated or tried to participate, that's when Hashem says, okay, you messed up and you're going to have to be in prison for a longer period of time. This is the story of Yosef. So what is it relevant to us? Relevant to us is to understand that maybe we're not on the level of Yosef, and we are not. But there are certain areas in our life, so we can define it and say that there's certain areas in your life that in order for them to achieve them, to achieve your goals or your ambitions or your desires, you have to work really hard. And the harder you work, the harder you participate, the harder you have ishtadlus, the more you have ishtadlus, the more you participate, simultaneously with the level of trust, the more blessings you get. But then there's areas in your life that you know that in this particular area in your life is charming, this chen, like Yosef, there's a certain level of charm. And that areas in your life, Hashem is guiding you in a way that's magical. That in those areas in your life, you have to know that what you really have to do with it in those areas in your life is not try to change anything or manipulate anything or participate in anything. You actually just have to allow it to flow through you. So again, within a person's life as well, just like we say that this idea of ishtadlus, that a person has to participate in the unfolding of his life, and for that either compartmentalize it or together with the level of trust, also simultaneously we have to realize that every person has certain things in their life. Maybe it's their love life or their relationship with their children or a relationship with livelihood or a relationship with learning, a relationship where Hashem puts them with their right friends or where they have to move. Tons of different things that happen in a person's life. Certain things in their life you say, if you look back in your life and you're honest about yourself, honest to yourself, you say, in those areas where I participated more, I worked more and I worked harder, those are the areas that I received more blessing. And then there's certain areas in your life where you say, actually, it's the opposite. What Hashem is trying to tell me is that these areas in your life, just let it flow, let it come through you. Let the blessings just come through you. And the more we actually live this way and connect with this type of light, this type of oyer of amunah, of bitachon, this type of light of faith and trust, to recognize that we're just an instrument, and the light and Hashem's light is coming through us and working its way through us, and we just open ourselves up to receive the divine flow and allow it to come through us, the more we actually become part of that flow, and the less it's resistant, and the more the blessings can just pass through us in a way that's just magical and dreamlike.